wanted to start with the candidate side of things. So, you've got a couple of clients, you're having roles coming through, and just really getting granular on how to approach that initial conversation with the candidate, the key things we want to think about. And most people just gloss over this. They think, oh, I've got the gift of the gab and I'm, good at talking to people and, I can get on really well with people, which is all fine. But I think, there's a huge difference between having a nice conversation with someone and having an effective conversation with someone where you truly understand them and you build that level of trust, which allows you to make recommendations and to actually be a trusted advisor to this candidate or these candidates in general. Um, so I wanted to start, Seb, right from the start. So let's say you've had a candidate respond to your outreach, they've agreed to the call, and it's 5-10 minutes before that call. What are the kind of things you're thinking of before that call? How are you preparing? What are the things you're looking at, and how are you kind of preparing for that initial conversation?
Yeah, it's a great question. And just to kick off, I want to address kind of the pretext for the things you said. Like when I first began recruiting, my first couple of years, I was doing like, I think I did 200 or 300K and then scaled up to 400K. But early on, I mean, the gift of the gab thing that you mentioned resonates. Like I would wing every candidate call. I'd be like, yeah. You just say hello and do some niceties. And then you immediately start pitching the job. And then afterwards, you're like, great. Does it sound interesting? Yes, no. What's your comp? Let's send them across. Bam, done. Job done. And like you can do a lot of deals that way. Like you can be a slightly elevated candidate matcher and build a book of business. But I think one thing that I realized once my kind of back was against the wall, and I was forced to hit certain numbers, that you really do need to structure and formulate the way that you screen candidates. There has to be a process. And, when I'm thinking of getting on that call, so I think you mentioned like, what's the mindset? What are the things that you kind of mentioned early on? I think I'm right in saying that was kind of the essence of the question. Yeah. So the first thing that I'm thinking about is I do not want to be an order taker. I do not want to get on that call and have the candidate think, oh yeah, that was Seb. He represented Tech Corp and he's representing me for that job. Before I even talk to them, I am establishing mentally that my goal is I want to be the only recruiter that this person ever works with again. And in order for that to happen, you need to head into it with the mindset that you are setting the foundation for a long-term relationship. So when you get on, you set the scene. Yeah, you have a bit of niceties, avoid weather and try to get down to some like common denominators. Hey, I see you're in Chicago. I actually used to live there for 2 years. Did you ever go to XYZ? So you build some common ground. But once you're through that, you kind of say, look, Charlie, I want to just set the scene here. I know I reached out to you about this job and I really do truly hope that it's a great fit for you. But the main reason I'm contacting you is because I've seen you in the space and I know that you're very good. I know that you're very networked and that we swim in the same circles. I just want to set the foundation and let you know kind of all about what I do and who I am so that we can build our kind of our base camp and figure out what kind of jobs are going to be right for you, what kind of opportunities are going to be right for you. But really the purpose of this call is for me to do some fact finding. It's to figure out what your aspirations are, what your pain points are. And then like, if this job I've reached out to you about check some of those boxes, great. I think it might, but it might not. And so what we're doing here is we're establishing the relationship so that as I get more and more roles that come on my desk, I'll know exactly the kind of things that make you tick. And also, as I talk to candidates and clients in the space, I'm going to know exactly the kind of information that's going to be interesting to you that I can share with you. So as I say, like my main thing early on is I'm setting the scene and basically saying, I'm not on this call to pitch you a job. I'm on this call for us to establish the base camp of a long-term relationship in the space. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great answer. I think it's one of the mistakes I see often with recruiters coming into the game. They see a title of a candidate, they speak to that person, and immediately they think they're qualified. And so it's immediate like, hey, well, I know I reached out about this role. It's this, it's that. What do you think? And what you want to do is just completely reverse that. And it's like it's sales 101, right? It's like, how on earth can you pitch something to someone if you have no idea what they even do? And so I think it's really smart. You've got to set the foundation. You've got to let them know that you're in this for the long game. You're not just here to ram a job down their throat that may or may not be a fit. You're here to ask them questions, find out their long-term aspirations, their factors, their pull factors. And if it makes sense to move it forward and we'll get onto that part of the call, then maybe you can talk about it. But I think establishing that foundation and positioning yourself as a trusted advisor who truly wants the best for them is so, so, so important. Okay. And that was actually going to be my next question. Um, Actually, maybe it'd be good to hear your opinion on that, Seb. So why, I know there's this temptation to dive into the opportunity and just get on with it because we're all time poor and we're trying to do these things quickly. Why don't, like, in your opinion, why is it a bad idea to do that?
The first call that you have with a candidate is the one time that they're going to be totally vulnerable with you. When you set the scene and say, hey, I'm not interested in pitching you this one job. I'm interested in being your talent agent for the rest of your professional career. Immediately, they're now open and they'll go, okay, well, I'm actually going to tell this guy all about what I care about and what I'm trying to achieve. And when you set the scene in that way, they say, okay, well, now I'm giving you information that is general about me and my life and my aspirations. I'm not just giving you my qualifications against this job. So the first thing is just in terms of like the quality of information that you're going to get out of them, it's your one chance to dive deep. Because the moment you say, well, actually, I do have a job that I'd like to represent you for, now the entire relationship that you have with that person for the next month is going to change because they're going to go, I know you're going to get paid $50,000 if you place me. So I know that everything that you say to me does have some kind of motive. Whereas on the first call, you go, look, I might not even have a job for you. Let's just talk. Now you're getting real vulnerable information that you can compound throughout the process and leverage that to close them down the road. The second thing, aside from just having total vulnerability and the quality of the information, is that if you just like, oh, I'm pressed for time, I need to just crack on with the job, you remove all leverage. When you're posturing as somebody that represents a company and a job, they are going to, again, think this person is on the call to close me and make money and push me through this process. So you lose all of your leverage because it's very clear what you're trying to do. Whereas if you say to them like, hey, I'm in this for the long run. I hope that this one client is a good fit, but if you don't work out, it's going to be horrible for my reputation. So I'm looking to find you the right fit. Now, what you've done is said, I'm a consultant, and this is one option of many that we're going to be talking about throughout our relationship. So you go down the order taker path, you're very one-sided, you lose your leverage, and you miss out on an opportunity to get true vulnerable information from the candidate.
Fantastic. Yeah. And it's what I mentioned. So flipping that dynamic, getting on the front foot, asking questions. It's only once you have this information that you can move forward. So what we've done is we've established our foundation. We've established the fact that you can trust me. Maybe you've talked about the market a little bit. You've established some credibility. And so already you are signaling that you're an expert and you're building trust, even subconsciously. Okay. So, I know one of the things we've preached for a few years now, Seb, is this notion of when you have this foundation, that next step, and specifically the 1 to 10 questions. Let's get into the 1 to 10 questions, which was taught to us by a long-term mentor of ours, who's actually done some masterclass, the playbook type stuff
the great
that
Joel
will be
Slenning.
getting onto the great Joel Slenning. So let's get into the 1 to 10. What is 1 to 10, and why is it important? And how do we even do 1 to 10?
Okay, so if you dig into like the ancient circles of recruiting, this 1 to 10 question is kind of their secret weapon. And on the surface, you're like, oh my God, asking this person 1 to 10 if they want the job, how basic and how transparent, and like it just seems weird. Here's the actual, like, the secret brilliance to this question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you at your current company? On a scale of 1 to 10, how interested are you in this job? You're forcing the person to quantify an emotion numerically, which is extremely unnatural. And it starts to make them think. It forces them to start thinking. Like if you were to say to somebody, hey man, how are you doing? Yeah, I'm doing well. But if you said, hey man, if you were to rank your life right now in terms of your happiness on a scale of 1 to 10, what's that number? Immediately you're like, whoa, hang on, let me think about this. So you're forcing them to actually kind of get vulnerable and emotional with you. And also for you, it allows you to quantify where they're at and then quantify how interested they are in the job. And then, hey, they say 7, you can start to make up the points. What makes it a 10? Let's quantify each of those points. But also it's huge ammunition, especially early on, because if you say at a high level, how happy are you in your current job? And they say 7, you would then say, okay, well, look, that's probably exactly average. And most people will say 7. If you had a buddy and you said, hey, mate, how are you doing right now? How happy are you with your life? And they say, about a 7. You'd probably say like, okay, that's a bit sad. You every day your life is averaged. What can we do to make that better? Right. So even though on the outside it seems like a little bit, I don't know, weird and basic, it's actually such a brilliant tool to make them think, to make them quantify how they feel. And then it sets the foundation for how you build towards a close and get them to a 10 out of 10, hopefully at the offer stage.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And at this point in the conversation, you're based on how well versed you are in your industry. You might know how good they are at their job based on the prestige of their company. Maybe you've seen in the market, whatever. But at this point in the conversation, we haven't actually asked any technical questions. These are questions that are pointed at whether this person is actually going to move for a new job, because that's key. Like the key things you need to, other than demonstrate, expertise and create a relationship and build a foundation, the key things you're looking to get out of this call is number one, are they even looking? Would they move? Because you could have the technically, culturally perfect candidate, but if they're a 10 out of 10, you're kind of wasting your time. And if they are a 10 out of 10, you kind of congratulate them and you ask why it is a 10. Um, they're not an active candidate if they are a 10. It's just going to be very challenging for you to place this candidate if their role theoretically couldn't get any better. But this really gets to the foundation of whether this person is going to move. So Seb, if I'm saying, oh, yeah, I guess it's going pretty well, and then you come in with the 1 to 10, and I'm at a 6. As a recruiter, what are you saying to me there? If I'm at a 6, what is the kind of rebuttal?
I think it's like I kind of mentioned it last time, but you create parallels because people are like, yeah, it's just my job. I'm at a 6 out of 10. But you're like, let's just take a moment. You're working this job for probably 10 to 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. So like what you're doing at your job is statistically the vast majority of your life. And if the vast majority of your life is a 6 out of 10, that's pretty sad. So the key thing, whatever the number is that they give, you have to have quite a visceral reaction. So if they're like, I'm at a 10 out of 10 happiness at my current company, you're like, well, that's amazing. Why are we on the phone? Like, I'm a recruiter. You know what I'm about. Like, I know I'm in it for the long term, but like,
Mm,
and if they're at a 6, you're like, wow, I'm sorry to hear that. You're at a 6. So like, you're saying to me that your life for 12 hours a day is like pretty average, kind of below
yeah,
par. That's so
yeah,
bad. Tell me why.
it is insane. It is insane. Sometimes when I forget to initially ask the 1 to 10, we speak to a candidate. They go, "Oh, yeah, no, it's pretty good. I'm doing well." And then when you challenge them and you get them to think, actually, out of 10, how is this? I've had 2s, I've had 3s, which has kind of prompted me to sort of step back and say, like, "Wow, you said it was going okay, but you told me it's a 3 out of 10. Let's talk about this." The analogy I like to use quite a bit, which gets a bit of a laugh, is the restaurant analogy. If you're asking someone to rate a restaurant out of 10 and it's anything less than a 7, you're probably not going to go to that restaurant, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so true. And yeah, like it allows you to use the technique which is pouring salt on the wound. Like they say 3 or 4, you're like, wow. Well, Charlie, I mean, it's fair to say then that we're talking at probably one of the low points of your professional career then, right? Let's get you out of it. And also like what that does, like when you do this is like they're learning something new. There's probably not many recruiters who have used this mechanism before. So when you force them to think and you force them to kind of go through that emotional cycle, then all of a sudden they're like, "Whoa, that was a different kind of conversation." Like
Hmm.
because most people say, "Hey, I got this job. What do you think?" Whereas when a recruiter sat you down and been like, kind of armchair expert therapist, like, how are you doing at the moment? Let's walk through it. Again, it
Hmm.
totally shifts the dynamic.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So we've established the 1 to 10, why we're doing it. Just to kind of tie the bow on this, I think the reason it's important comes down to the reason people take jobs. People take jobs because of their wants and needs. They don't take jobs because you're selling to them things they don't want. And so the reason this is critical is because based on your rebuttal to their, 6, 7, 8, or maybe 2 or 3 out of 10, you're getting absolutely critical information which you are going to use to your advantage. Maybe not now, but later down the line. It's the notion that closing happens from a first call, which is something that we were taught fairly early on, something that I fervently believe. And so this information is absolutely gold. And it's something that you're going to be using if this candidate is, of course, interested in the role down the line to assist with the close of the candidate. Okay.
It also it gives you like just to play off what you mentioned, like when you're able to quantify their pain, like the great John McMahon, who's the ex-CRO of MongoDB and Snowflake and various others, like when you're able to quantify the pain, it gives you an anchor to create urgency. So, like, if you have a candidate, right? I think one of the things for young recruiters is having candidates go cold on you. But if you've really quantified that pain, like, hey, what happens if nothing changes? And they're like, well, I'm going to be living this miserable life, or I'm going to be continuing to get paid this rubbish amount of money, whatever it is. So when all of a sudden you cold call them because they've gone cold for whatever reason, and they say, hey, look, I'm really busy. Can I call you later? You say, well, Charlie, just hang on a minute. Let me just ask you this. When we first spoke 2 weeks ago, you told me that you're on the hamster wheel, you're underpaid, and if nothing changes, this is going to happen. I've got some new developments from the process that might be interesting. Do you have 5 minutes? And then all of a sudden, 5 minutes turns into 15 minutes, turns into half an hour, and you got the process back because you quantified the pain, right? And it gives you an anchor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, one of the key things I like to do after the 1 to 10 is you need to reciprocate. You need to almost regurgitate what you've heard and spell it back to them. And there's a couple of reasons we do this, but it's the notion of making them feel heard. It builds trust. That's the first thing. The second thing is to make sure you got it right. You may not have heard correctly, and it may be something else which is causing them to look. Um, but how are you going about regurgitating what you heard to this candidate?
Yeah, I think it's important to be really specific. And I've been saying this a lot recently, but it's also really important to summarize what they've said in a way that's like above the noise. So they might say, I'm not paid well enough. I don't have a good enough title. Or maybe I'm not given any autonomy over the work that I'm doing. But these are all features, and you need to kind of see where their pain is above the noise. So, big picture, it's like, is this a status thing? They are not given the status that they want in the company. Maybe it's given autonomy, like maybe they're not given the right autonomy, or maybe it's just a survival thing. They're simply not earning enough money to live a way that's making them happy, right? So you need to say like, okay, so it sounds to me, Charlie, like this point is a pain point. This one is really frustrating. This one's really frustrating. You're looking for something that solves for these things. But high level, what we're talking about here is you're working at a business that is not providing you with autonomy, stability. You're looking at the pain above the noise. And then from there, you can get to work and start quantifying the specific selling criteria of your client and how we solve for that kind of
Hmm.
specifically. And it's something that you
Hmm.
want to reinforce. Just to your point as
Hmm.
well, like after every call, we want to do this again. When we first spoke, you told me XYZ about how you're feeling. Do we feel as though this business is solving for that? And you get it in, you get it out in, in the open, and you get it in writing, etc.
Absolutely. And you want to be really particular here. You want to operate with precision. So it's not like, oh, it sounds like you're pretty unhappy. Let's move on. It's like just to make sure I've got this right. What I'm hearing is X. What I'm hearing is Y. And as a result of that, you feel like Z. Does that sound
Mm.
about right? Am I missing anything? And usually you're like, oh, and actually that is right. Obviously it's right. You've just said it, but it's really important that we kind of regurgitate what we've heard to them. Okay, so we're at the point where we've established the foundation, we're building trust, we've earned a bit of credibility, we've got the 1 to 10 questions. We've had a pretty deep conversation about where they're at. Now comes for the technical side, and we've regurgitated. Now comes for the technical side. And look, this isn't something for us to get into because um, every every job is different, every industry is different. But what I like to do is I'm then thinking about the role, and I'm thinking about the key things in that role because it's usually a role. If by the way, if I'm not speaking to them about a role, um, I'll maybe talk about talk about other things. But usually it's about a role, and I'm wanting to ask them probably the 3 to 5 technical questions that I know is needed in that role for me to determine then whether they're going to be a fit for this position. So I'm asking them these questions, um, and then based on that, I'm then recommending whether we move forward or not. How are you handling that area of the call?
I think one of the things that I'm very conscious of doing at this stage, which I think is one of the reasons I lost deals early in my career, and but like I see it often, is that people have the temptation to answer the question for the candidate, right? So let's just say you're looking at the person's resume and they are, I mean, I don't know, they're a project developer. Let's use the renewable energy industry. They're a project developer that has worked on a MISO project and and it's solar, right? And that's something that the company's looking for. The temptation is to say, hey, I've looked at your experience. It seems like you've done solar and MISO. Is that right? Have you done that? It seems like you're an expert in that field, right? Is that correct? And they go, yeah, I have done that. And what we're doing is it's just basically in an echo chamber saying how qualified they are, and then they move on. When it comes to the technical screening, you have to kind of shift your mindset a little bit. You're going from consultation to basically scorecarding them on the job. So instead of answering the question for them and saying, hey, the company's really looking for this, would you say that you've done that? It seems like you have, like, positive. We're changing the tone a little bit. And it's like, hey, look, for this specific position, this is going to be a waste of time for you unless you've specifically done this. This comes up in the first round interview and it will come out and all this stuff. And I also don't want to put you forward for a job that's just technically not going to be very satisfying for you. So with that, can you tell me in really specific terms, what kind of work you've done as it relates to project development in MISO? How involved were you at all different stages of the project? What would you say like your main responsibility is? Let's go from there. So as I say, it's essential like not to answer the question for them and then ask them to basically give them their experience, but you frame it as like, hey, we're going to waste everyone's time, especially yours, if we just fluff this and try and get an interview. There's a bunch of other stuff, but that's my first kind of thought on the
Hmm.
technical piece.
Hmm. Yeah, it's absolutely key. And this stems from a good intake call. We haven't spoken about intake calls. It's probably a topic we'll get into at some point. But you need to know the critical questions that you need to ask the candidate for them to be qualified for this role. So from the notes and the questions we've asked so far, you've established they might be looking if we hit XYZ, right? The technical questions are so important. And to pick up on your point, Seb, I think it's the way you ask them is so important. And then listening for the right answer is so important as well. I think so many recruiters will just like zone out because they're not the technical expert or they don't think they are. But one of the key things to ask on the intake call that I like to ask hiring managers is, okay, well, if I ask this question, I'm pretty sure what a good answer what looks like, but I want you to tell me what does a good answer look like for you, and what does a bad answer look like. So I'm screening for this early because again, I have no interest, Mr. or Miss Client, presenting you folks that aren't going to be a fit. So I agree. The way you're phrasing these questions, what you're listening for, and this is going to be the bulk of your write up. Okay, so you've asked these questions, and based off the first part of the call, maybe they're a 6 or a 7 out of 10. So there's movement there. They could move, and you feel they're a technical, a cultural fit. What do you then? Well, I suppose we're then moving into the pitch of the client, and also the role. How do you go about pitching your client and pitching the role? Like how do you think about the structure of it? What kind of research do you do beforehand?
So in terms of the research, um, and just generally like setting the scene for the client pitch, the most important thing is that you're providing information that's not publicly available, right? Or if you are providing information that is publicly available, you're just doing it in like kind of a checklisty sort of a way, right? But if you just basically say the headline of the business and go through the job description and then move the process forward, you've missed a huge opportunity to educate the candidate on what this business is. Again, in a deeper way. So when it comes to research, like you want to, of course, just knock out the basics so that you very clearly kind of qualify yourself as an expert. They were founded on day X. This is the founder. This is the current CEO. These are the most exciting project wins and things that they've done recently. Any fundraising, you just knock that out and you're like, okay, you obviously know all this stuff. But here's what I really want to talk about. And when I think about pitching the client, I think of How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, which is that every single person in the world wants to feel important. Okay. So what you're trying to do here is pitch the company in a way that makes this candidate the hero of the story. So what you might say is like, hey, look, this is a really cool company and they were founded in X and they've done all of this stuff. But here's the thing. They're trying to get to this new level, right? They've got a new project. They've got a new thing that's happening and they've run into this problem. They need a project developer who is going to unlock this whole new territory. And it's a massive part of their business plan. And so although things have been going very, very well, they have this thing and they need a hero of the story that's going to unlock all of these things. Now they're going to be learning from this person. People want learning. So the person in charge of this person is an expert. There's a ton that you can learn from. The project exposure is interesting for all of these reasons. You're going to have all of these resources underneath you, blah, blah, blah. But the most important thing I'm getting across is I'm establishing that I'm an expert with facts. And then I'm very deliberately painting the picture as we need a hero to help them unlock this new level of success. And it's going to be a challenging road. There's going to be mountains to hike and rivers to cross, but they might just be looking for someone with your kind of experience. And based on the pain points that you've mentioned to me and the aspirations that you've specifically mentioned to me, I'm framing that hero story in a way that solves for those really key things that they've mentioned. So it's not just here's the company, here's what they've done, and here's the job description. It's a whole story that solves for the kind of the arc of the discussion. And then, it's your canvas to kind of paint the picture the way you like.
Mm. Yeah, that last bit was what I was going to mention. I think the first thing that I want to do before going into the company is say, well, look, based on what you told me, both technically, culturally, things you're looking for, I think this could be really interesting. And I've got an opportunity that I think might be quite a good fit. You never want to, why do you never want to go over the top here? Why do you never want to say, oh my gosh, I've got the best thing since sliced bread, Mr. or Miss Candidate? Why do you think we want to level at something that could be a fit and we want to push it back on them?
Yeah, like so the I know this is like weasel words, like this might be good, this could be good. People are attracted to like a little bit of friction. Like if you're telling someone point blank, I know this is perfect for you, I know that like blah blah blah, then it's going to be unattractive to them. Naturally their reaction is like, don't tell me what to do, don't tell me what's perfect for me. But what you're doing is like introducing the idea that they could be good for it and ultimately making them the decision maker, where they're like, yeah, you said that it could be a good fit for me. You know what, it's actually a perfect fit for me and here's why. So you want to kind of set them up to sell themselves. And then just also in general in sales, I think like it's critical to have nuance and like a little bit of style and a little bit of hard to get, because the minute you remove that layer, you remove all leverage and they're in control. And again, it just sounds a little bit like disingenuous, I think. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You also don't want to put them on a pedestal. You don't want to make them feel like they're the best candidate. You want to make them feel like they're in a competition here. You want to make this role something's awesome. But if we play our cards right, we could have an incredible opportunity where you could change your life. For XYZ reason you told me. I think it has the ability to match up quite well. Okay, so you've been through and the company pitch, that's almost a whole other conversation, right? It's just so important you get this right. Like if you do a great job on the front half of the call, but your company pitch is just really, really wordy and scripted and just not very genuine, it's really going to let you down because you build up this credibility. And then yeah, is a candidate really going to trust you if you just don't know much about your client? No, they're not. And really, there's no excuses now with ChatGPT and deep research reports. You can get, I mean, you can get incredible descriptions of these companies and really kind of in depth. Sometimes they'll pick up on interviews with the founders, stuff that is not going to be well in the fullness of time. Maybe they could find the stuff on Google, but probably not. I always like to speak about my relationship with the client as well, what we've done before, what they're like. I think people, they're motivated by companies, but really they're motivated by the people behind these companies. What are they like? What do they like to work with? What are their personality traits? These kind of things. But as I say, this is a whole other conversation. Okay, so you've spoken
Just Charlie,
about.
to tap in there as well,
Okay,
because like there's going to be a lot of people building new markets. Like I think as well, if you don't have a long lasting relationship with that client, but you still want to reference it, you could still make that exciting. Like how long have you worked with these guys? Oh, well, 2 months. Right. But get a bit of storytelling going. Like, look, I'm picky about who I work with, but I discovered this company because I noticed that they did this and I got introduced to this person and they started telling me this story. And so I was like, I want to work with these guys. And yeah, they're a new client, but like I am excited to build this business for reasons XYZ.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, definitely don't. Uh, you definitely don't just tell a white lie and talk about this fantastic relationship with a client you met a week ago. Definitely flip it and be honest here. And you can do it, as you said, in so many different ways. Like they're just looking to hire. This one's hot off the press. And this is actually a very new relationship, but I was able to have a fantastic call with the founder, and here's what they're like, and so and so. You can't like, it's going to come back to bite you. Okay, cool. So we're at the point in the call where we've built, just to go through it again, we built trust. We've gone through the 1 to 10. We've established that there's a need and a want, and the candidate could in fact move. We've asked them a few technical questions. They've their answers to the technical questions signal to us that they are a good fit for the role. So we've recommended we move forward. So let's tie the loop on this conversation. What are kind of like the final few things here?
Well, I don't know if we reference this, but like it's like the recommend kind of thing. It's like you're not like I'm going to get you in process. It's like, I recommend that we move forward. It sounds like there's enough here to at least spark the initial conversation. So that's the first thing. Of course, when you gather information on the candidate, you must have nailed down the logistics. So salary, all the stuff that could kill the deal. Look at logistics as threats that will kill your pipeline and make sure that you get tremendous amount of detail. I'll never get salary for a larger range than 5K base or 5% bonus, start dates, blah, 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 blah. But the next thing you're going to do, which is absolutely critical, is setting expectations with the candidate. So you need to establish the medium and the frequency of communication that you're going to have with them. And in this situation, my preference is this. Look, I'm a hyperactive recruiter. I like to be in touch with my client and my candidate in a very intimate way. Like every hour that a communication arises, like I'd like to have an answer. I operate best over text. So the first thing is like get to a text message basis, right? Do not just operate over email. Email moves at the speed of a day or two. Text message, the average person checks their phone every 3 minutes. So you want to say, look, if my client gives me an interview request, I would expect to get some kind of response in 24 hours if I text you, right? Are you okay with that? Or are you someone that needs a little bit longer? But the point is, you're laying the foundation for how quickly and how often you're going to communicate so that there is zero possibility of ghosting. And then you're also going to like start to talk about that scenario. So like, look, another thing that I ask is that you're just honest with me. If all of a sudden you get cold feet and this doesn't feel right, just tell me straight up so that I can communicate with that with my client, because I'm working with this client. They are relying on me to fill this position. And if they really like you, but you've decided mentally that this isn't for you and we drag it along, it's going to make us all look bad. So as I say, it's the setting of expectations. And then I guess the only other thing that I'd mention is like, you want to create like a low pressure first time introduction to the client, assume the sale. Look, the first round conversation is pretty non-committal. Like it's an exploratory call. You get to know the client, you figure out all about what they're about, and then we can see how we go from there. But we assume the sale, we set expectations, and then I think we're pretty much good to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, just to pick up on how important it is to set up a communication architecture. Like, what's the best way to communicate with you? Email's kind of crap. You want to, for me, the best way to communicate with candidates is over text. If you can get them on text as quick as possible, that's really the main aim. Same with clients, by the way. But communication architecture, and yeah, something we glossed over, which are just I guess the logistical questions. You might branch into commercial questions as well, like, where else are you interviewing? Are you interviewing? All that kind of stuff. But it's really, really important that you get the salary questions, you get the remote, are you able to move to a certain city, yeah, any kind of golden handcuffs, all logistical stuff, which just could bite you in the ass. You need to have a realistic picture. Anything else with the logistics and any other important questions that perhaps we've missed, we've glossed over?
I think like just with the logistics, like challenge them, you know? So if they say, if you go, okay, so when's your site, like when's your end of year bonus, right? And they say it's in March. Okay, and how much is it? It's $50,000. Um, you know, and like the temptation is to go, oh yeah, and just to confirm, like you'd be okay with like, just starting before then and walking away from the bonus. Yeah, yeah, I would. You like any logistics that like set off the red flag in your mind, like just challenge them on it. So, okay, that's $50,000. That's quite a bit of money. Are you going to just walk away from that completely if I get you a job beforehand? Okay, well, no. All right. Well, then how much would you need in order to make same thing as like with relocation? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or travel. Yeah, I'm happy to travel. Happy to travel 3 days a week. And you go, okay, well, that's interesting. Let me just ask you this. How old are your children? What does your significant other do for work? Talk to me about that. And then they're like, well, yeah, I do have 3 kids. It's like, okay, well, how old are your kids? Well, I've got, a 3 month old and I've got a 1 year old and whatever. And you're like, hang on. So you're telling me you're going to leave your 3 infant children while you go on the road for 3 days a week? Is this something that you've actually talked with your significant other about? And so my point is like, when it comes to the logistics, you frame all this stuff. And also the same goes for anything, communication cadence, like challenge them on it versus answer the question for them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's critical. So cool. Well, we're just about done on time, but hopefully that's been a pretty good overview of the entire call. I suppose maybe the only other thing I'd mention is when, like, as a general rule of thumb, and the question I pose to my team is, if you're not willing, when you come to the end of the conversation, if you're not willing to put $100, right, or depending how wealthy you are, maybe more, $100 on the fact that this, or bet $100 that this candidate is an interview request, just ask yourself whether it's worth it. $100. And the reason this is important is because every candidate you send to a client that is not interview requested is downgrading you, is signaling to the client this person doesn't know what they're looking for. Other recruiters might know what they're looking for. So yeah, and I say this to recruiters on the team all the time, like every single piece of communication, by the way, with a client is so important. It's a signal of how good you are, the kind of recruiter you are. So as a general rule of thumb, think about that. But just
Yeah.
it's so important to zone in on the fact that we don't want to be sending any candidates who we don't think are, number one, going to move, and number two, are not technically qualified to be really successful in this role. It's just a waste of everyone's time and your credibility.
It reminds me of Chad Peets, who's like, if you haven't listened to Chad Peets, like listen to him. He's just screaming into the microphone, like, salesperson. But he would say, like, he was somebody who's like now partner at a huge VC company, but called Sutter Hill Ventures. But he started out as a recruiter actually. And he would say into the microphone, he goes, yeah, I had a very clear reputation. 2 candidates, 1 hire every single time. That's my reputation. And like and he built an unbelievable reputation. He was number one sales software sales recruiter in Silicon Valley. He then was hired by a Silicon Valley venture capital company and is now a partner. And when you build that kind of reputation for yourself, it also gives you leverage to the client when you're pitching yourself the first time. Hey, I'm known for one thing: two candidates, one hire. I'm an expert. Versus like I'm basically just a slightly upgraded candidate matching system, and all the rest of
Yeah.
it. But yeah, it's a brilliant point.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Yeah, that guy's a machine. Some good podcasts. We can maybe link the podcast underneath the show in the show notes. So yeah, and just like the last litmus test, if your client called you up and asked you, tell me why this candidate's a fit, how would you be feeling? Is that something you can knock out the park? If the answer is no, probably not right. If the answer is yes, probably right. So that $100 sort of litmus test, that notion of the client calling you and asking you to pitch, which never usually happens, but just really really important stuff. Okay, cool. Well, this has been a good exercise. Hopefully that was helpful to everyone. If they have any questions about any area there, feel free to ping us. And of course, if there's any topics that people want us to get into, we can absolutely get into them. But yeah, hopefully that was helpful.
Cool. And guys, we'll wrap up here for the podcast. So this has been a great session.